The invasion of Ukraine is horrible and tragic. There is no excuse, and yet we must pull back the lens of our emotions and grief and look at the reality of both perspectives of the conflict to avert global war. We are staring at an abyss of conflict, and we cannot be naive to the risk we are entering if we refuse to compromise. We must act for our safety. We have been kept from understanding the background of the invasion of Ukraine. Is our global stability, your financial and physical security in the West, worth 3 regions that wanted to vote to leave Ukraine after their legal government was overthrown with visual US support in 2014, leading to a civil war that the US funded one side of? Did you know the US and UK pulled Ukraine from working negotiations in Turkey that could have ended the war? What triggered the invasion is Zelensky said he would take back Crimea by any means, including war, in the summer of 2021. It was obvious to the Russians that would have meant them replacing their base with NATO in Crimea at the 300-year-old Russian military base permanently stationed there in Sebastopol. NATO had gone against their own promises and invited Ukraine to come into NATO weapons military architecture in 2008, a known red line for the Russians. The warning had been there for a decade. We have been told over and over that Russia invaded to take over Europe and reconstitute the Soviet Union. This is actually not the case. They wanted to negotiate to not have certain weapon systems within striking range. They also invaded to force negotiations regarding more countries close to them joining NATO because of the weapons, and certain kinds of missiles not in first strike range to them. They sent treaties of negotiation that were meant to be a starting point that were basically ignored. There is an offer from Russia again to end the war on the table now. All Ukraine and the US have to do is say yes, forfeit about 15% of Ukraine, part of the Donbass that was a part of the USSR before 1991, and have it be done. But will we be able to accept it? Or will we force Russia to continue out of our refusal, forcing underground war, only push back a deal yet later, gaining nothing by delaying it? Will the fury obscure the vision of our population and our leaders? Russia has all but won the war and doesn't want to rule Western Ukraine. We may despise Russian culture, or Chinese culture for that matter. Our own is tragically deteriorating before our eyes. Listening to this video helps to end the war. There is an unbelievable misunderstanding, both about the background and the risk we are engaging in, both the US and Europe. It is like the god of war cast a spell. The lack of understanding of the background doesn't even make sense when we have an open media. That creates a condition where it's hard to look at even vetted info as I have here. An objective summary is extremely hard to find. We trust our analysts and news, and important pieces of the puzzle are occluded, like the fact that Crimea voted for their independence in 1992 when the USSR was splitting, so Ukraine dissolved their parliament. Despite what we have been told, Russia's invasion of Ukraine was not a desire for land or oil, or to conquer Europe. It was a four-pronged cause. 1. 3 regions asking to vote to cede due to visible US support in the overthrow of legally elected Yanukovych in 2014. 2. The failure of legal negotiations called Minsk II, signed to settle the horrible civil war in the Donbass after 14,000 casualties. And 3rd, the build-up of US involvement for a decade, and 4th, Zelensky announcing he would take back Crimea, even by force, who was denied a legal vote to leave Ukraine. I am not saying the horrible Russian invasion is justified, but we have to get real to that we are risking World War III and our own safety over 3 regions that wanted to vote to leave Ukraine, after the US was on the mic when the government was violently overthrown for leaving a dicey EU trade deal. The association agreement EU deal Yanukovych rejected didn't pave the way for EU membership that he did want. He was not simply a Russian puppet. He wanted EU integration. The deal was hard to say both yes or no to, hard financially to say yes to, and hard socially to say no to. He was going to revisit it. The country was in deep debt, and the EU deal was expensive to say yes to. They applied for loans from the IMF and EU that were rejected. Russia offered $15 billion in cash and cheap gas. Taking the EU deal meant they could no longer trade with former trade partners, and they tried to negotiate to trade with both the EU and their former partners, but that was not allowed. There were lots of details. Yanukovych said he would revisit it in a year. He may have had corruption issues, but these have been endemic to Ukraine. The US is a matchbox, the rest of the world sees what's going on, and we can lose much more than we think. There is no need for the massive suffering that is possible if we fail to rise to this challenge. Please consider your friends and family and ask yourself if widespread unrest is worth these 3 regions that wanted to vote, according to the UN Charter, in circumstances of overthrows. Please take to the streets, call your senators, do everything you possibly can to force negotiations with Russia, and then next with China, and yes, in Israel. The US looks suicidal to the rest of the world. There is another way. We need to look what happened square in the face, compromise, and move on to our global challenges, which will take all of our energy. I'm begging you and warning you. Avert global war. It's not necessary. Stop funding the war. Russia will stop the further attack. They already offered this. Have Ukraine protect the 80% that is left with defense that is non-NATO but strong. It will work. The US has put and tried to put its nuclear-capable weapons architecture at the border of major powers and done nation-building there for our interests. We would not tolerate the same behavior on our borders. Also, we promise not to expand NATO. The only way is through negotiations, and other major countries are on the other side strong. If Ukraine and the US and allies don't do it, and keep escalating and doing things like locking in funding for endless war, as our leader is doing now so the policy can't change in the future, there may not be a way out. All delaying negotiations will do is make it worse, and gain nothing but more tragedy and risk. Our relationship with China needs mending, not escalation. Escalation may affect our quality of life in unforeseen ways, with unforeseen timing. Russia will feel forced to take. My heart bleeds for the Ukrainians, and I am here to warn you, more death and war is not going to help this situation. We may not like Russian culture, but is it worth our safety over trying to police them over their culture when we have insanity brewing at home? We have got to get it together and help ourselves and our region if we have any to spare. We are causing the world to arm more and more. This is not the Armageddon you are looking for. There is a better way through our global rebirth, and it involves not triggering major war. Thank you for listening. peaceinukraine.org.
No more war, we'll find another way.